was a senior member of the Network Support Division at AT&T. How many of you used AT&T? See, Richard has helped you on all of those. Seymour, Connecticut resident led cross-functional teams to successfully deliver million-dollar high-tech projects. Outside of Toastmasters, Richard has served as club president and lieutenant governor for Kiwanis International. He's a member of the Lions Club, and he's worked in various capacities with the Catholic War veterans. He's also a commissioner on local government board. Here's something I bet you didn't know. Richard is a professionally licensed race car driver. And in his limited spare time, you can find him at the racetrack. He's either a driver or a spectator. Toastmaster since 2006. Richard's a member of the Nutmeg Toastmasters Club in Woodbridge, Connecticut, and also currently a member of the Park City Toastmasters Club in Stratford, Connecticut. And in keeping with our theme of the meeting, I'm happy to report he has traveled virtually 2,908 miles to be with us here in Ventura County. Please help me in welcoming the International President's Distinguished Toastmaster, Richard E. Peck. Let's give it up for Richard.
Well, thank you, Wayne. Do you know what was great about my trip out to Ventura, California tonight? My luggage arrived with me. And I didn't have to find a connecting flight anywhere. Thank you all for having me with you tonight. Linda was the one who had been reaching out to me for a while now, as she had seen me on another meeting and said, "Can I invite you to my club?" And I was happy that we were able to work it into the schedule. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you about success, achievements, if you will, and whether or not you may be the barrier to your own success. And as I relate the stories to you, as I relate what I've learned to you, it's more about how I was the barrier to my success. But it's going to be delivered in a way that I hope it's relatable to you. And as you're listening to it and you reflect upon what you've achieved in your life, or what, in your opinion, you've not achieved. Notice I didn't use the word fail, but have not achieved. Whether any of these barriers may apply to you. Have you ever asked yourself, why am I not as successful as that person over there? Why am I not as successful as, well, that person over there? What is it that is holding me back? And I remember as I was growing up and I was asking myself those questions, of course, you know, we're all impressionable when we're younger and we see everything on TV, the wealth, the money, the people who have things. Would find myself blaming others for my not being successful. And I think we often do that to some extent. And as I started working my way through life, through my career, and through my Toastmasters journey, I often found myself asking am I as successful as I want to be? Why can't I be as successful as that person? And is that person really successful, or is it just the way I view it? And as I started to take steps back to assess who I was, where I was and where I wanted to be, I realized something that caught me off guard. And it was the fact that I was my own roadblock. I was preventing myself from being successful. Now, mind you, in some instances, there was no way I was going to achieve the success that I was looking for. After all, I'm not Brad Pitt. I don't have those looks. I'm not going to be a big actor in Hollywood. Of course, Brad Pitt doesn't have my voice, so he can't have that either. But sometimes we set goals that are way too high that we're never going to achieve. But sometimes there are goals that are right there in front of us that we stop ourselves from achieving. And when I finally analyzed what it was, there were three primary barriers that I found that were keeping me from being successful or as successful as I would like to be. And to be honest with you, even though I'm the international president of this organization, and some of you would say that was a achievement of success, there are still times when I question, am I as successful as I could be? Because titles aren't a symbol or an indication of success. Titles are an indication of responsibility when you think about it. So let me tell you the three barriers that I found to success. Three barriers that, if you reflect, you may find in your life as well. So the first barrier is the words we use or the words we hear. And I'm going to go into these a little bit more in depth after I go through the presentation. So it's the words we use or the words we hear. The second primary barrier is fear. Let's be honest. We all have that fear. Najib this evening mentioned the intimidation of speaking in front of the international president. Najib, can you imagine the intimidation I'm feeling right now speaking in front of a global audience? Because you're all looking at me as he's the international president. He should be able to speak. In the first ah or you're hearing, you're going to go, you know what? He's just a member. He's just a member. So it's the fear that we have that we put in front of us. And the third, and probably the most difficult for all of us to realize or to admit to, is the people who we associate with. That is the hardest one of all to realize. But let's talk about the words that we hear or the words that we use. And the words we've probably heard since we were young. And they all have something in common. They have N apostrophe T at the end of them. You can't, you won't, you aren't, you couldn't, you shouldn't, you wouldn't. And we hear that when we're growing up. You're not smart enough. You can't play basketball or sports. You're not athletic. You couldn't do that. You don't have the skills. You shouldn't do that. That's not who you are. And we hear those words as we're growing up. And then we get them locked into the back of our minds. And the minute we go to do something, The minute we go to try something, that N' starts grabbing at the back of our head and tells us that we couldn't or we shouldn't. And guess what happens? We don't. It's two simple letters with an apostrophe in the middle, and they lock us from achieving our goals. How did we get so fixated on that type of content that we ended up believing it? That we ended up believing it. Let me ask you this question, and you can respond in chat if you'd like. Which of these two statements to you sounds worse? I can't do it. I'm not good enough. Or you can't do it. You're not good enough. And mind you, neither one of them are good statements to hear. But for me, the first one is the most harmful. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. And the reason I feel that that is the most dangerous is because that's a reflection we have of ourselves. See, if somebody's telling me I'm not good enough, I have a choice. Listen to them or not. Get away from them or stay with them. But when it's stuck in my head and I'm believing it, it's more detrimental to my being able to achieve my goals. So the words we hear, the words we use can stop us like that. The second is fear. And we all have some level of fear. When we get up in front of an audience and give a speech, we have some level of fear. Am I going to connect? Are the words the right words? I'm sure Linda, when she sent me that first email and said, can you attend this meeting, had a little fear that of what my response was going to be. And is she and should she be reaching out to the international president? But she did. And there's three main fears. I'm going to cover them very briefly. So the first is xenophobia. Now, in recent years, xenophobia has meant fear of people. It's developed into that fear. But the heart and soul of xenophobia, back when it was originally used, was fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown. And when we attempt to do something that we've never ever done before, there's that unknown. Think about when March 11th, my birthday, Linda, March 11th, 2020, I get to have the honor of being related to the global pandemic being declared, yay me. But when we went into this year, think of the unknown. As we work through this, the fear of the unknown. When your club decides it's going to start meeting in person in restaurants, the unknown of how you connect with your global audience is a real fear that you're going to have to face. But it's a fear that we face when we attempt to do something as well. The second one is a teachaphobia, and that's a fear of failure. And we all have that fear because we have an ego attached to it. If we fail, are people going to look at us differently? Are they going to say, as a leader, you failed? As a speaker, you failed? I told you not to do that in the first place. Didn't I use that N''T? You did it anyhow, and now you failed. And now the N''T gets back in my head. And I decide I don't want to do anything anymore. So that fear of failure is real. You know what's great about Toastmasters? Is you never fail. You never fail. We clap, we encourage, we engage, we support. You never fail. But in the real world, there's that risk. And the third fear, which is the most interesting fear that I've ever read about and done some studies on, is Achievemophobia. Achievemophobia. And you know what that is? That's the fear of actually being successful. Can you believe that people are fearful of being successful? And they are because it could change their whole environment. They may have to meet with different people. They may have to move. They may have to live in a different environment. But more importantly, the fear is that they may not be able to be successful again. They may not be able to be successful again. Think about that. Think about the club president for Aju this year. Wants to be a president's distinguished club. And then the incoming club president now has to think about that same type of achievement. Now they're fearful about whether they can or cannot achieve that. And then that becomes the barrier for them. The third barrier is the people that we associate with. And I'm going to give you two animals to relate these individuals to. And as you hear the descriptions, I want you to think to yourself, do I know someone like this? Don't raise your hands, please. I don't want to know if you know anyone like this, but think about it to yourself. So the first are crabs. Crabs. How many of you are familiar with a crab bucket? Okay, a few hands here. So a crab bucket is a bucket that is full of live crabs that have just been harvested from the waters. And it's full to the top. Now, the crabs on the top of the bucket have one thing in mind: get out of the bucket. All the crabs underneath of them have something in mind. They want to get out the bucket. So what they're doing is they're pulling the crabs on the top down to try to be able to get over top of them to be successful. In our lives, we will have people that are trying to hold us down, trying to prevent us from being successful. And it may be because there's a fear that we're going to leave them behind. It may be a fear that they'll never have what you might have. It's those individuals that are stopping you from doing something, that are holding you down, that are the crabs in your lives. And the second type of animal that we need to avoid in our lives are parrots. Parrots. Now, what do we know about parrots? Is that they mimic us, right? If we say a word, they're going to say a word. If we say, I want to ride a motorcycle, the parrot's going to say, I want to ride a motorcycle. The difference with parrots in this instance is they will tell you that they've already done what you've done, and it's not worth it. So, Linda, you want to become a club president. Alan's going to say, Linda, I've been a club president. You don't want to do it. It's too much work. It's too many hours. It's too many days. It's going to stop you from becoming that president right away. All he did was mimic exactly his experience on you. And maybe he wasn't even a president. They give you the words back in a negative way. And they cause you to think about it and that it's not worth it. and they will prevent you from being successful. If you want to achieve success, and I'm sure that you have, but if you want to continue, please heed these three things. Lose the N apostrophe T. If you heard it in the past, forget about it. If you're putting it on yourself, lose it. You could, you should, you will, you can. Embrace your fears. Understand what it is that's stopping you from a standpoint of fear. If you're afraid of achieving something, you never will. Why not try achieving it and then feel out what the fear is? And third, avoid the crabs and parrots in your life. Don't let anybody hold you back from achieving the success that you can achieve. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. Remove those barriers and achieve all the success that you can. Toastmaster of the day.